Hi, I'm Vanessa, and I will be covering the portions of the general overview and how it relates to social work for our presentation. So our group has decided to focus on the homeless population. I have some previous knowledge on that area as my placement for first semester was with the housing response team with the Salvation Army. This is where I was first introduced to the spdat being used as an assessment tool, and our group thought that this would be a great tool to introduce, as majority of us all had a basic understanding before doing our presentation, but we thought we would introduce it to our peers and provide some more information on it. We quickly seen the importance of this tool and how it can be super beneficial to our field, as well as different environments that have client-based relationships. So I will be discussing what assessment tool we will be talking about, what is the spdat, the different types of spdat, why it's important to understand our population, who this tool can be used for, and the scoring components involved. So the assessment tool that we will be using, like I said, will be the spdat. The spdat stands for Service Prioritization Decision Assistance Tool. It is a tool used for various populations that work in different environments. Because of the population we decided to speak about, we felt that this tool would be great to introduce, as it is one of the many tools that can be used to assess homeless clients in the different fields of work. The spdat is a questionnaire built of different categories. The spdat is designed to ask questions that will provide the worker with a better understanding of where the client's risks and the vulnerability is, and the factors that weigh into that. So the purpose of the tool is to allow the professional working to have an idea of the areas that may need a little more assistance for that client and see where they will be able to help the client, or if they can be referred to another service that will benefit the client more. The categories that can range from physical and mental wellness to history of homelessness, as well as substance use. So some subjects are very touchy for the client, so they can choose whether to answer or not, but it's basically to just provide the professional with an idea of the areas that have a little more risk factors than the others. So each set of questions can be scored from 1 to 4, depending on the criteria that the client touches on within their answer. Meaning, for a duration of 6 years, for history of homelessness, they would be scored a level 4 because they are currently homeless and have been for the past 6 years, indicating there's issues with either tenancy or keeping a unit down, kind of thing. And as the relationship and rapport builds, the worker may be able to identify the reason behind some of these answers. So that's kind of ideally the main goal for using a spdat, is to locate the issues that may be present within the client when first interaction, and then once everything progresses, you're able to identify the issues that the client exposes later on, so you're able to provide more services in those directions. So different types of spdats. There are a few different types of spdats, and the spdat that our group is focused on is the longer version of the spdat. Our guest speaker, Troy Evans, who is a rooming house case manager, will discuss the different elements within the spdats later on. The spdat is a long version of the spdat that uses the 60 questions that assesses the client. This spdat is used within the housing response team. It's used 3 times, depending on the relationship with the client. So one during the intake to assess the needs and areas of risk. One once better rapport has been formed between the worker and the client, and a final spdat being done towards exit. The objective is to hopefully see the score decrease over time once certain areas have been addressed. So why it's important to understand our population. Not only within our field of work, it's important to understand because we may later on be working with this type of population, but we see the importance of the services being at an all-time high and the necessity that's needed. So for our population, we see various issues, and I will touch on that later on with how it relates to social work, but for our class and the importance of our presentation is to find the key issues that are present within that population. So mental health, substance use, all areas that our social work covers is of great importance to us. So following that is who this tool can be used to assess. Like I said, any client-based environment and working professional can use this. The professional should have a basic understanding of the spdat or should be trained in it properly because it is heavy content use. And if something triggering is said, or if the client discloses information that the professional feels should be brought to someone's attention, they need to know how to properly handle those types of scenarios, as well as being able to be compassionate and empathetic because the content you are talking about. Someone is being vulnerable with you, they're opening up in fear of maybe being judged, and that is like the difficult aspect of using a spdat, is because the clients have to be open and they have to be willing to disclose information to you, and if they aren't, it's a difficult process to do. So leading into that, the scoring components involved. When doing a spdat, the professional, well, at least in my experience, the professional does a little spiel or a lecture about the use of the spdat and introduces it to the client so that they have an understanding of what they're answering and why answering to the best of their ability is important, because it can provide better care for them, and in the end, it's to benefit their relationship. So the scoring components for the lengthy spdat is 1 to 4. So if a question is asked and a client meets the certain criteria of that answer, so 1 or 0 meaning there's no risk, so there is no harm, there is no chance of anything happening, that would be level 0. 1 indicating that there's some concern, 2 indicating that there is medium concern, but nothing that can't be adapted or changed within that time. 3, medium risk to high risk, and then 4 indicating that there is a higher chance of risk. So these are big components when it comes to mental health, when it comes to physical health, because those are huge indicators of where the client stands within that time that you're addressing these issues. So if a client is being asked about mental health and they're showing signs, it's better to score higher to provide better assistance than it is to score lower, because then you're reducing the chance of providing them with better care in case something were to happen. So it's always important to score higher rather than lower, just to cover any issues that may be happening, as well as address the issues that are being talked about and disclosed within that time. So if a client were to address mental health issues in the past, that should be an indication that there was a time of mental illness perhaps, and that it should be carried on and addressed and evaluated throughout the process of the relationship, just to provide any type of service if needed, and that there should be, in case of chance of vulnerability, that we're able to provide the services that may be needed. As well as the scoring components is a huge factor, because the client needs to feel comfortable with sharing any information that they haven't talked to a professional about. They may feel judged or ashamed and provide an answer that they feel that the worker wants to hear, which makes it difficult for the relationship because they aren't being 100% honest, and it's difficult for the worker to then assess properly the areas of weakness or the areas that could lead to more improvement. And it's a super hard constraint, and it's a limit for the rapport that can be built, because we want to ensure at the end of the day that we're providing the best assistance that we can for the clients that we're helping. And to do so, we have to meet a bunch of criteria and a bunch of factors that we're able to provide the best care that we can for them. So all of those components lead into how it relates to social work. So definition of homelessness. According to the Urban Dictionary, the definition of homelessness is defined as the state of having no home. So although that this is correct, it is only one of the many issues that these individuals endure. It doesn't begin to touch on the surface of what they're battling behind the scenes. And having a placement like this really tears down stigma and stereotypes that people may have before coming into an environment like this. We see homelessness and we're quick to judge. I was, at least coming into my placement, and then being exposed to completely new adaptations like really opens your mind. So these individuals are in the situation they are for a certain reason, whether it be mental health, substance use. Many of our veterans, refugees, are all in this situation because it was beyond their control. And people need to understand that as well, because having a quick eye to judge is very difficult coming into an environment like this where we're expected to help and having our own biases. We're not able to provide the assistance needed because the client can sense that we're not comfortable, or we have our own biases of why they may be in that situation, and that's not our job to do. Our job is to ensure that they get the best treatment that they can from our services. So being in this profession, it is important to understand the obstacles that these individuals are faced with on a daily basis, and see the need and the demand that is still so dominant within our own city, which is truly eye-opening. While being in this program, we all get a small glimpse of the importance that revolve around this issue, but it's important that we learn from that so we can provide a foundation to create change once we start our own careers. This may be a population that some of us will work in, so it is important that we're open and open-minded to working with these individuals and treating them as people rather than looking at their past and judging the areas that they may have had weakness in. We're able to see the resilience that's needed in these individuals to get to where they are. And what's crazy is to see that within our own city we have a bunch of these issues and that resources are falling short. Shelters are at capacity, and according to an article published by CBC News, Laura Osman, in 2018, more than 25 homeless individuals are left without a space to rest each night. And to have that kind of background, being in your own city, in your own backyard, that these issues are still occurring in, is devastating, because we still have a lot of progress to be made, and knowing that those areas need to be worked in is something that we need to really consider. So, as I talked about the spdat being used and how it relates to social work, it's one of the many assessment tools that can be used for this type of relationship with our population. Not only can it be used within our population, but like I said, within other client-based environments and relationships, all depending on how the individual feels, or how the professional feels with the individual, and what is best to assess their certain criteria. For the spdat, it covers a wide variety of criteria to be used within receiving housing, because for some individuals, if they score higher within mental health, they're eligible for certain housing, for assistant housing, so 24/7 availability of watch, counseling services. An example of this is SALIS housing. So anyone who has high range of mental health, they are accepted into SALIS because they can provide special care for the clients. They have on-call assistance, they have security, they have just any need for the individuals they're accepting, because they know the vulnerability and the demographic that they're bringing into their apartments, which is truly wonderful, because we need so much more of that within our city. And another area of how it relates to social work, from what I've seen, is the Maslow's hierarchy. At the end of the day, we all need basic necessity, and for these individuals, reaching some of those resources is very difficult, and we should all be given a right to have accessibility to food and water, to shelter, and for them it's a daily struggle. And so that's where it comes into social work, because we provide services such as food banks, housing, counseling services, mental health advocacy, all of those areas that really lead into this population and all areas of difficulties with this population. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Molly Armstrong, and today I'm going to be talking about the prevalence of homelessness locally, provincially, nationally, and how important it is to talk about preventing homelessness. The homeless in our city is rising by 5.1%. In 2017, there was a total known of 7,530 homeless individuals. As of 2018, we knew that 66% of the homeless were staying in emergency shelters and 16% in transitional housing. Ontario scored a poverty rate of 13.5, making it 6 out of the 10 provinces. On CTV News, they posted a program aimed at measuring homelessness in Ontario has put on hold, raising concerns of that lack of data could prevent some municipals from addressing the problem. It was difficult to find current statistics on homelessness in Ontario as of the lack of data, and it's hard to calculate the data whenever there's 50,000 people make up the hidden homeless in Canada. So, like, for example, couch surfing, staying at a friend's place, in institutions, jails, hospitals, treatment centers. And it's roughly estimated that 235,000 Canadians experience homelessness each year. Many people experience poverty, and the numbers are, I feel, higher than the data we have. So, who is homeless in Canada? We have single adult males aged 25 to 55. They represent 47.2%. Women, they represent 27.3%. Youth, the ages of 13 to 24, represent 20%. That's 1 in 7 youths. Aboriginal peoples are overrepresented of 5%, and that's 1 in 4. I'm going to talk about the poverty cycle now. And before we get into the cycle, we need to understand what poverty is. So, poverty is an economic state where families' resources have dipped below the amount necessary to sustain a certain quality of life. The starting point is when families are living in low income. It can be hard for families finding a place to live, as of the places to rent, places to live are so expensive. Depending on their education also and their job status, it can be hard finding a place to live and be comfortable. So that can lead to family expenses and exceed wages. So you're focused on buying food, paying rent, and you're sort of tight on money and going paycheck to paycheck. Can't afford healthy foods, so you're getting the cheap foods like ramen and not the healthy vegetables because they're so expensive. That can lead to poor health outcomes. And also if you have children, it can be really hard trouble maintaining housing when children's brains are developing during this time. They need healthy foods. After this, it may become a result of being homeless from this cycle, which reduces the employment prospects, and it just starts from the starting point. There are so many myths that exist about being homeless and are generalizations of more complicated reality. It is important for those who have never experienced homelessness before to understand that every homeless individual faces a different and complex set of circumstances. It is responsible for the general public to educate themselves about issues related to homeless. This will hopefully result in sensitive, compassionate conversation and solutions to homeless. People don't choose to be homeless. There's a variety of different factors that contribute to individuals' experience of being homeless, like eviction, the affordable housing crisis. Yeah, coping with mental illness and addiction can be difficult to maintain independent housing. So this is like a society thing we have to deal with as.
So when it comes to assessment constraints for the spdat tool, we actually have about several of them. So the first one is it's actually having a language barrier. The spdat assessment tool only comes in 2 languages, which is English and French. And even though we live in a country where our official 2 languages are English and French, we are a multicultural country with many different languages being spoken. So if we were to have a client that didn't speak either of these languages, we would have a really hard time helping them out, even if we could get a translator to translate from English to any other language that is needed. Another constraint is when clients don't truthfully disclose or when they're withholding information when they're participating in spdat testing, which in turn, it actually gives the worker false results and false information, and therefore we can't fully help our client to the fully extent we would be able to if they had given us those truthful answers. Client intoxication is also a big constraint to this assessment because they can't give you sober, truthful information and answers, and it's just not ethically correct for ourselves as the worker to still conduct a meeting with a client who is intoxicated by alcohol or marijuana or any other substance for that matter. So actually in that term, you would just have to end up rescheduling the meeting for the future when the client isn't intoxicated. And actually the another constraint is the questions the spdat scoring system uses. They're very personal questions and they can influence feelings of judgment and shame, as well as there's also the possibility that the client can get triggered when they're answering the questions. So the worker really needs to ensure that they have created a safe space for the client and have developed a really trusting relationship between that worker and the client so that they feel comfortable answering all the questions that are going to need to be asked. As well as when it comes to a spdat tool, not just any worker can use it. The worker actually has to be trained and certified to be able to use the spdat tool and complete the scoring for the client. So, if there's no one within the agency that you're working in who is certified to use the spdat tool, then you're obviously going to either have to find another means of helping this client out, or you're going to have to refer the client to another agency that does have a worker who is certified, which could be very nerve-wracking for the client because then of course they have to rebuild up that trusting relationship again and get comfortable with a completely new different worker when they came in thinking that they were just going to be working with you. And finally, there's always the potential of that worker bias. Either it can be the biases towards the spdat tool and maybe some questions in the spdat tool, or it can also be a bias towards the client. So of course you as the worker or anyone else as the worker will need to ensure that they can push those biases aside and remain professional, and always have that judgment call that if you feel you can't push those biases aside and be fully professionally committed to this client, then you're going to have to pass the assessment on to another trusted worker who is certified in spdat to be able to complete the testing.
All right. Hey guys, so my name is Casey and I'm going to be talking about the intervention plan part of our presentation. So in the spdat assessment, there are a number of different areas that we focus on. This includes physical health, mental health, medication, substance abuse, experience of abuse, risk of harm to others, social relationships, really anything you can think of. In Ottawa, we have many different agencies that provide resources for homeless people. So I'm just going to touch on a few of those. But before I do that, I'm going to talk about SMART goals. So SMART goals are a way of helping our client make sure that whatever we're working towards is relevant, and it's what basically SMART stands for: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. So this makes sure that we have a goal that will actually get done and will actually get the client somewhere. So we can use our spdat assessment in helping us to create these goals. All right, so as for shelters in Ottawa, we have quite a few different options. A lot of them are full most of the time, so it's important that we call ahead as social service workers, and make sure that we're not referring these clients to places that they can't stay. But just to name 3 shelters in Ottawa, we have the Carling Family Housing. They provide emergency shelter and assistance in obtaining appropriate housing. So they're located at 100 Constellation Drive, and basically if you go there for emergency shelter, then you can start working with a worker and they'll help you to find a place to live, whether it's you go through City of Ottawa, or there's many different options. Then there's another shelter called Cornerstone Housing for Women. They provide emergency shelter for homeless women, and they support in crisis intervention, and they give community referrals to a lot of different agencies. So really they're trying to support women in every way. There's also the Ottawa Mission. They provide shelter for men. They also have housing assistance, as do the Carling Family Housing and the Cornerstone Housing for Women. But they also have employment support. That's a really big one, helping these people find a job. Yeah. So next we have Ontario Works. Ontario Works is a big one to talk about. A lot of people don't realize that being signed up for welfare, you can receive some money, so that's a base. It's important to be a part of them just so that you can get some support. So if you ever have a client that hasn't been involved with Ontario Works, you can find them at 2020 Walkley Road or at 613-560-0624. Yeah, I would just really recommend that you get your clients set up with Ontario Works. As for food banks and soup kitchens, we have quite a few agencies that help out with food in Ottawa. The only issue is there's a few places that you can only go if they're part of your jurisdiction. So depending on where you're living, you can go visit. There are a few though that don't do that, like Shepherds of Good Hope. They provide service, like drop-in service for lunch and supper. So it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you live, you can go to Shepherds of Good Hope at 233 Murray Street every day for lunch and supper. Then there's also the Caldwell Family Center. They're the kind that you have to live in their neighborhood, so they provide a food cupboard for families in the surrounding area. They're at 1100 Medford Street. Then we also have an agency called the Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Center. They provide emergency food services once per month. So basically like a food bank, you can go there once per month, pick up food, and that's about it. They're located at 815 St. Laurent Boulevard. The last type of agencies I'm going to touch on just to help, we are seeing large numbers of Indigenous people as part of our homeless population, so it's important to support them culturally as well. We have a lot of different organizations that are just set out just to help Indigenous people or Aboriginal people, which is great. One of these is called Wabeno. They have many great programs, not only for assisting homeless people, but they assist First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people to find safe, affordable, and permanent housing. They also provide one-on-one case management. They identify individuals' strengths and challenges, and they start goal setting. They provide culturally specific Indigenous resources, so really anything you can think of. Wabeno is located at 299 Montreal Road, and you can call them at 613-748-0657. We also have a few other agencies that are specifically just for housing. So we have the Twegan Housing for Aboriginal Youth. So any youth that is identifies as Aboriginal can go to Twegan if they have beds available. I think they are semi-independent living, so which is a great way to transition our youth into living on their own, but also giving them some support and cultural resources in the meantime. We also have the Gignal nonprofit Housing for Aboriginal People. They are located at 396 McLaren Street, and we also have the Inuit Nonprofit Housing Corporation, which is at 311 MacArthur Avenue, which is only for Inuit people. Yeah, so that's all, and thank you for listening.
Hi everyone, my name's Troy. I am currently the rooming house case manager at the Salvation Army here in Ottawa at 171 George Street in the market. So I'm here under a different circumstance, I guess. Same reason, but sadly we can't do this in person, so hopefully this video is going to give you enough information to cover all the things that Vanessa asked. And I am very much willing and open to answer any questions after this video. I'll leave a contact with Vanessa, and anyone who has any questions or would like me to elaborate or anything on anything that I've said, please feel free to contact me. So as I said, I am the rooming house case manager at the Salvation Army. I didn't start at this position. I've been here at the Salvation Army coming on to 2 years. I started first as an outreach worker in the van that the Salvation Army has around the city. So I'll give you a little background on myself first, how I got to that position and how I came to work here. So going back, we'll say about 10 years, 11 years ago, I got into recovery. I am alcoholic and a drug addict. I suffered almost 28 years of alcoholism and crack addiction, cocaine addiction. But I'm happy to say that I have been sober now. I'm in my 10th year and will hopefully, God willing, celebrate 10 years of sobriety coming this next January. So my life is definitely an example of how programs that the Salvation Army provide and how people can get into contact with recovery through housing, through all these different ways. And my story is not much different from anyone else, but it's definitely a story of struggle and some amazing recovery, you know. So I grew up in a small town not far from here. I was sexually abused as a young child, only to discover that in recovery. But that trauma caused me to look for coping mechanisms, and alcohol became one of those very early on. At about 11 years old, I started to drink. And from that day on, I spent every living moment trying to find ways to use and to get high. Geez, you know, it's a hard story to talk about, but the end result of the story is the best part. Is that you know, I did find my way to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I never did a treatment program or anything like that. I happened to have a family member who was in AA, brought me to a meeting. It didn't take the first time, but I came back after another year and a half of research, so to speak, to see if I really was alcoholic, and I'm happy to say that I was able to admit it and come into recovery. And you know, the 12-step program has been an amazing process for me. It's worked in my life. I continue to use it. I go to AA meetings every day. I go to them online. I go to them in person. I sponsor people. I have a sponsor. I use the 12 steps in my daily life today, and I try to transfer what I've learned and what I've gained from 10 years of sitting in rooms with other alcoholics recovering and relapsing, and I get to use that in this job, which you can imagine is a great resource. So, some of the things that recovery has given me is one, I'm a useful human being again. I contribute to society. I pay my taxes. I have children that I take care of. I'm a dad now. Some of my kids live with me. I have grandchildren that are all in my life. All the things that I had done through my addiction. You can imagine 28 years of addiction. I caused a lot of pain and suffering to the people around me. And through the recovery process, I was able to make amends and do all this hard work to repair my life. And through that, I decided a couple of years ago to go back to school. My health wasn't going very well. My body wasn't feeling good, and my doctor agreed that I needed to get out of the type of work I was doing, which was hard labor construction, and get into something that's less physical. So it was a hard choice to make. It took me a little while. I knew I would have going back to school was going to take away from my children. It was gonna, I'd have to try to support myself. All the things that go through someone's mind. If you can imagine trying to go back to school in your 40s. I'm currently 48 years old, and I went back to school I guess I was 45, turning 46. So I had to go back to high school first, get grade 11 credit. I had to do certain things first, which were challenging, but I did it and I stuck to it. I managed to qualify for a program the Ontario government was offering, and I'm not sure if they still are, called Second Career, which allowed me to choose based on demographics and jobs available and a whole process that we went through. I was able to choose a field where there was a good chance of success of me getting employed after school. So I chose to go to Willis College. They offered a 46-week addiction and social service program. I enrolled in that. I qualified for it. I got into the program through a grant. The government paid for everything for free, including and up to paying for a bus pass. I had to support myself financially, but I didn't have to pay for school. So that was awesome. I worked really hard. I finished at the top of my class with a 98 as a final grade. And amazingly, 2 weeks after graduation, I applied at the Salvation Army and had an interview. And within a month and a half of graduating, I had a full-time job as an outreach worker with the Salvation Army. So that's been an amazing experience for me. It's one of the things that I say when I tell people what my recovery is like is that AA and recovery has given me things that I didn't know I wanted. I came into recovery to, get people off my back. I was sick. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, waking up in strange places with strange faces, not knowing what happened the night before, empty bank accounts, sad children, all the stuff that my addiction had done to me. I've turned that around, and now I have this amazing job where I get to meet amazing people like your friend Vanessa, who wants to work in this field and who's aspiring to help people, and that's what I'm trying to do is I'm out here to help people. So to touch a little bit on what I do for a living here at Salvation Army, my role as the rooming house case manager involves a mandate that includes housing loss prevention and anything that encompasses that. So I'm alone in the department, which is very cool because I'm my own boss. I have a supervisor and a manager, but they are very much hands off and allow me to run the rooming house department as I see fit, which is great because I have my own sort of way of seeing things, my own way of seeing how the tools they give us and how the things, the finances that are available, I need to make them work for me in this program. And the spdat and things that they provide us are great tools to allow someone to work independently with people. So I'll explain a little bit how that works. I'll explain a little bit how my role is. And just tell you how we use this tool as a guide and not as a rule, you know. So when I came into the outreach program, there's a couple of different types of spadats that we use. The one is called a VI spadat, and one is called a PR VI spadat, and then there is a full length spadat. So the VI spadat is the first one that I started using, which is a short form. It's a questionnaire of, I believe, 27 questions, and this one is used by outreach workers who are dealing with the homeless population directly. So people who are currently living on the streets. So what this does is it gives the worker a scoring system. So each question will give a score of 0 or 1. And they'll touch on things like wellness, how are you able to take care of basic needs, what are some of your mental health issues, what have some of your past housing issues been, what are some of the barriers you face, things like that that can be triggering with clients, but that if explained properly, and I try to always explain at the beginning that clients don't have to answer anything they don't feel like answering. We can stop at any time. It's completely confidential. SPDAT SPDAT information collection is not used to distribute around other agencies. It's strictly for the worker to assess where the vulnerability lies most with the client. So it's our goal to assess where the client is most vulnerable, where their needs are, and help them to achieve whatever they need to make those things less vulnerable, those areas of their life. We're not doctors, we're not lawyers, we don't give legal advice. We're simply housing workers who are trying to stabilize people in something that is as challenging as recovery. Our program, which is one of the things I like about it most, is that it's a graduation process over long term. My program specifically, I can keep clients for up to 6 months, and I can also transfer them to longer care if needed. HRT workers or housing response workers who work with the homeless population and are housing homeless people can work and stabilize a client for up to 2 years. So if the stabilization doesn't take the first time and the person is evicted or they lose their housing, they're not thrown out of the program. They don't have to requalify. They simply have to call back the worker, and they're picked up again as soon as there's a space open on a caseload, and you can try again. Housing, I've learned since I've been here, is very much like recovery, where it for many people it takes multiple attempts before you find a fit. Some people have been outside for such a long period of time that they've become institutionalized to the outdoors. So maybe you've heard stories. I've seen cases now where people, one gentleman slept in his tent in his living room for maybe 6 months before he was able to sleep in a bedroom. Another case where people sleep on the balcony in a place where they've rented, where they don't feel safe sleeping indoors. So these are some of the issues that we run into right off the bat with people. Is like they haven't been housed for quite some time. So just even getting them stabilized in housing. So this SPDAT, it'll help us determine where those needs are going to come up. The one I use is called a PR VI SPDAT, which is a housing loss prevention. So mine gauges where the vulnerability for housing loss is within the client. So it asks questions such as, has drinking or drug use caused you to lose housing in the past? Have you had any sort of trauma, physical injury that has caused you to be evicted? Do you need special supports for living? So there's all sorts of questions, and at the end I tally up whether it's a 1 or a 0, count it up, and it gives me a score that puts them in an area that shows me where I'm allowed to work with them. So anything below 10 means that I would refer the client to another agency, so they wouldn't need supports from me. Their housing is not in danger of being lost. Anything 11 to, I believe, 21 is where I work with clients, and anything over 22 up to 25, I guess, would be longer term care, and I would hand them off to a different agency that can support for longer care. So these spdats are used worldwide in most agencies that are doing social work. What it does is it gives sort of a blanket tool for people to use at the beginning of the process of coming into contact with people who are coming from homelessness or who are in danger of losing their housing, and giving the worker a place to start, a place to work, and they can show the client based on their answers that this is not something that the worker thinks is best for you. These are things that are admittedly, based on what the client has told you, things where they need help. So now, how do you get someone to be honest in a test like this? This was something that I found challenging in the beginning, because at first I felt, based on looking at it from my point of view when I was using and very much in my addiction, honesty was not always my best policy. I never told people how much I used. I never wanted to admit to how much I was using. I didn't want to talk about my mental health issues. I didn't want to acknowledge that I had mental health issues. So all of these things need to be taken into consideration when coming into contact with people, when you want to build rapport with them and using a tool like this. You have to be willing to make, I guess, calls on the score you're going to give them and the answer there based on your own judgment sometimes. Many people, for instance, there's a question that talks about, do you have things that you look forward to throughout the day that give you something to, something fulfilling? Most people want to say yes to that, because no one wants to say, no, man, I don't have nothing. I don't have anything. I don't have friends. I'm just trying to survive. I'm living on the street. I'm trying not to get high. Whatever the case may be, people are very reluctant to give true answers to these questions because they think that you want to hear a positive answer. So one of the things that's important to establish, that I found important to establish, is a trust in understanding and knowing your own instincts, knowing your clientele. Many times you're going to be doing this assessment upon your first meeting, right? Now the long version of the spdat that's used by housing workers, it's much more extensive. It's 60 questions. It's much more elaborate. The worker has much more freedom in writing comments, and this one is very useful because it's used throughout the relationship with the client. Now, there's one done in the beginning, there's one done once they're housed, and then there's one done upon exit. Now, the goal is to have the score lowered as the relationship builds, as the stabilization progresses, as the client and the worker work together on the things that they've found through the spdat, and amongst other tools. We can see that over time this works, that this tool helps the worker gain their own sort of confidence in the fact that when you gain trust with someone and they start answering positively or truthfully, you can really start to help. Because in the beginning, when people don't trust you and they think you're just there like every other worker, and you don't really care about what, these are just stupid questions, when you can start to show them that you're working on the things that they say that they're struggling in, and they're the ones who are finding the solutions, because that's our goal as a worker, is not to tell them what to do or this is what I think is best for you, but to help them find the solutions that they need based on their past experience, what they think is best for them, and what's available. Those three things are very important, right? Their past experience, what's available, and where they're at. Things, what can they use, what have they used in the past, and what's in front of them right now. So I've found that the spdat is very useful, but it's not the only tool I rely on. I use it at the beginning to show me what I need to work on with a client. It establishes it establishes the fact that I can work with them by the score that they're given, so that I can put them on my caseload. And from there, I move forward and I use all the other tools available at my disposal to try to help people not become evicted. So that's a lot to say. There's a question here on constraints that I find in my job. There are some constraints in the system. I find it very frustrating that we are mandated to help people live better lives in their housing, to help people find housing in a system where housing is unavailable, it's unaffordable. The stuff that is affordable is unlivable. The cockroaches, the bed bugs, the drugs, prostitution, the mismanagement of the locations. There's so many barriers in the system based on fear and misrepresentation, misunderstanding, lack of information, lack of resources that are available and not that people aren't aware of. There's so many things that can become constraints when you're in this field. For me, what I found is I look at what my limits are as a worker first, and I work within that, and I stay within that. I don't try to do more than I can do for people. At the beginning, when I started helping, it's easy to get trapped in the I want to help everyone and solve every problem, and I have a solution for this, and I know that person for that, and but when you want to build rapport with people, what they want to see is honesty. They want to know that you're not trying to pull one over on them, that you're not trying to tell them that you know things that you don't, that you're more experienced than you are. Like, book knowledge is awesome, and we all need that. And I continue to learn and strive to learn, but also trust your own experience. Whether or not you've been an addict is irrelevant. Whether or not you've been homeless is irrelevant. All of us have had experiences of trauma or past things that we've had to deal with that we didn't know how, or we didn't have help with, where we had to reach out for help. Some people are good at that, some people aren't. Some people will always need help. That doesn't mean they're not worth helping. What I'm here to do is to try to build relationship with client so that they trust me enough to tell me the truth about what's going on with their life, so that I can help them in the areas that they need the most help. But if people don't trust you, they're not going to want to tell you the things that make them most vulnerable, because that's where they need help, is their vulnerabilities. But sitting with a stranger who you just met and telling them what you're afraid of and where your weaknesses lie is not an easy thing to do. It's our job to get that client to feel good enough to disclose things to you that they don't want to tell other people. Recovery, in my opinion, has to have two things. It has to have connection, and it has to have trust. If it doesn't have those two things, there's not a whole lot of hope. So whether it's recovery from addiction, recovery from homelessness, recovery from sexual trauma, recovery from whatever it is that your clients in the future are dealing with, if you look for experiences in your own life that you've overcome things, and you use that as a way to guide people, not tell them, but guide them by honest disclosure, without being too honest, and without telling people things that they don't need to know, but trusting the fact that just because someone is homeless and poor does not mean that they're stupid and that they don't observe things. It's been my experience in the last 2 years that people who are in this sector, who are vulnerable, who spend a lot of time in shelters, in homeless situations, are very observant, and they see everything. and they hear everything and they listen to people and they watch. And what they want is to see that what you're saying is true by your actions, not by what you're saying, right? The spdat is a great way to build that relationship with somebody because you're sitting there with them and they're revealing, even though it's a question and it's based on yes or no, they're revealing very personal and vulnerable information to a stranger. So you get to take that and build a relationship with them based on what you can pick out of that you know you can help them solve their problems, because whatever it is, there's something in the system that you can refer them to. It may be slow, it may not work the first time, but it's our resilience, it's our determination as workers that give our clients strength. That's the way I see it. Without, if we give up the first time a client doesn't show up for a meeting, or we say, oh, this guy's full of shit, I know he's using and he's saying he's not, that's not going to get us anywhere. That's not the goal of the spdat. The goal is to build trust, because without that trust, there's no rapport. And the rapport building is the most important part of this. My clients trust me because I'm honest with them. I don't come in there thinking I know already what all your problems are. You know, just because you're living in a rooming house, well, you must be a drug addict and you must have been this and you must have. No, I go in thinking that I know nothing about this person. I have no idea what's wrong. I have no idea what their issues are. And I have no idea what they're going to tell me. So when I approach each client with that attitude, I've observed that the rapport building goes much easier, much quicker. People are looking for someone to trust. They're looking for help. So when you're there as a worker, they want to be open, but there may be past experiences with other people that have left them feeling, I can't trust anyone. So how do we get past that? Well, every one of you sitting here listening to this is going to have to find your own way. You're going to have to find a way with the tools provided. Some housing workers have a lot of money they can work with. Me, as a rooming house worker, I have a small budget of a few $1,000s for the whole year to disperse amongst all the clients that I come into contact with. So I have to be resourceful. That's one of the things that I've learned in this, that as an addict and alcoholic, I was very resourceful. I had to find ways to drink and use and get what I needed all the time. That's transferred into this great new job, and I can use that resourcefulness to help people. So regardless of what your experience is, regardless of where you come from, how much you think, oh, how am I ever going to be a good helper? I've never been addicted. That's irrelevant. If you want to help people and you truly have a heart of giving back to your community, that's what people want. Your experience will come later. Your experience and trusting your judgment, that's going to come with practice. You're going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes. I've done things I've regretted. I've lied about clients to get them into programs, like things that I should never have done. But I came clean about it. I made the reparations where I needed to, and I keep growing and I keep going. This job has made me a better person. It's given me a different perspective on harm reduction. It's given me a different perspective on homelessness. I now see the barriers that people face, and I want to continue working in this. I hope that this gives you an idea of what this tool is. As I said at the beginning, I'm open for questions. I'm open for any sort of dialogue that people want to have. I speak at AA meetings regularly as an open speaker. I love to talk, as you can probably tell by this, and I enjoy what I do. So I hope this was helpful. You guys take this, use it as you want. I give you free use of this to disperse amongst yourselves, and I hope somebody gets something from this that they can use in the future. And that's why I'm doing this. This is another experience for me that I can put under my belt to say I'm trying to help other people. So best of luck to you in the future, and I hope to hear from some of you. See you later.